Good afternoon, good morning to those joining in from the U.S. and that region, and greetings and good evening to those of you all joining us from the Middle East and Asia. Thank you for joining us. We are talking about a very interesting topic, and as you can see on your screen, simple strategies for building a rock-solid, as I would like to say, file integrity monitoring solution. Before we carry on, a couple of simple hygiene issues, and I insist your life is more important, so if there is a fire alarm, you can always come back and listen in. Save yourself first. Otherwise, do please switch off or mute your mobiles. As I say, you can even aeroplane mode it and listen in. There's some interesting conversations here. File integrity monitoring is very, very close to my heart as a cybersecurity professional, and very close to a lot of different things that require a good cybersecurity posture. So I'm going to go straight in, be joined in by Mark and Chris, and I'm going to introduce them very briefly as we move forward. They are, folks, please listen in again, downloads available. So on your screen, you should be able to click on some links and download some PDFs. And you can always come back and click on those links and download the PDFs. Some very interesting materials we've put up there. There's actually, Chris Payne has put up a PowerPoint presentation also that you can use to present on your own, as long as obviously you give all the necessary credits. Okay, I'm the guy in the middle with the blue turban. I'll talk a little bit less now. Chris, over to you, sir, first. A brief introduction. What do you do, and etc.
Hello everybody, my name's Chris Payne. I am the Managing Director for an IT security solutions and services provider in Europe, and we are a partner of NewNet Technologies.
Thank you, Chris. Mark, you are the CEO of a product that Chris is going to talk about, and I'm going to be challenging him and you about what you do and how you do it. Brief introduction about what you are, who you are, sir.
All right. Yeah. Well, good. Hello, everybody, and looking forward to being challenged. I am the guy on. I'm the guy on the far left. That's me. Although I think that's a very flattering picture of me, I would say. But there you go. That's me. And as Amar's quite rightly pointed out, I'm the chief exec of a software company, a manufacturer, in actual fact, and we build a solution, and part of what we do is we deliver file integrity monitoring, and it's a big subject. So at the risk of diving in too early, I'll stop there. But that's me, and yeah, very much looking forward to the session.
Mark, thank you so much. And we're going to pretty much go straight in. But before we do that, we've got 2 or 3 logos here: PCI DSS. The UK's NCSC, National Cybersecurity Center, and ISO 27001. And I can talk about it. I'm a cybersecurity professional myself, a practicing CISO. But Chris, you give me a little bit about why all of these logos are on this screen.
Yeah, sure thing. So I think anybody on the call that is familiar with file integrity monitoring, or FIM as it's usually called, they'll probably be aware of it from PCI DSS. So anybody processing card payments or storing card data will normally have to have a PCI DSS accreditation, and it's always been a part of the standard to use a FIM-based solution. But the reason for including the other 2 logos is actually the wider use of FIM and also configuration management as well. And particularly if you look at something like ISO 27001, or even if you look at something like GDPR, dare we say it, it's about a risk approach to information security. And of course, FIM solutions and secure configuration management are all going to be features of getting those accreditations or complying with those regulations as well. And the final one in the bottom left-hand corner, very new, the minimum cybersecurity standard, which is the latest addition to IT teams in the UK government sector, the next thing they have to comply with. And again, features in that particular requirement, FIM and secure configuration. So it's not just about PCI DSS, it is about other types of standards as well. And of course, arguably, FIM and secure configuration management should feature in any healthy IT security plan as well.
Thank you. Mark, I'm going to come to you a bit later, but thanks, Chris. I mean, let's dive. I love this image. Let's dive straight in. Now, I've got a couple of thoughts on this because, like I said, I'm a practicing CISO myself. We do a lot of trusted advisory, and one of the things we also do is a CIPR planning and response course for executives. And the key mantra behind everything here is early detection. Now, to me, FIM, as Chris put it, or file integrity monitoring, is really critical. Forget compliance for a second. If you are in an industry not in the compliance space, FIM is one of those key requirements. I wouldn't call it basic. I would say essential requirements. You must consider. I mean, if you look at what we have on the screen here, Chris and Mark, and please tell me if you agree, but this is kind of a really oversimplification of FIM, if I may, a little bit, to try to demonstrate that, you've got some plain text in the screen here. I want to know if someone is changing anything in a file, whether it's a regular file, but at the same time, an operating system file, right? Now, to me, that's really critical. But Mark, if you can kind of step in a little bit, when NNT, when they were designing this solution from ground up, what was the thought process there?
Yeah, I mean, it's this is a great example of it, and it's a really a fascinating subject, and I think you touched on it, and I think you made a really good point, and I think it's worth giving this a bit of an airing early on, because I think when people think about file integrity monitoring, they tend to think of it broadly in isolation, which sounds a bit paradoxical, but and I think they also tend to think of it from a kind of compliance perspective. And I think that the fascinating thing for me about file integrity monitoring, or let's just call it FIM for the moment, the thing that really fascinates me is that it's, to me, it kind of embodies, it's almost like the manifestation, it's almost like the kind of material sort of, see it, touch it, feel it, everything that's wrong right now with cybersecurity, and I think this is a really good backdrop to making that point. And the point that I really want to just make sure everybody buys into it. I think if you take nothing else away from today, this sort of next point is absolutely crucial. File integrity monitoring exists because it's a really, really crucial part of any cybersecurity play. In fact, I would go one stage further and say you cannot claim to be secure unless you have some sort of file integrity monitoring. And what this slide does is it does a good example of highlighting everything that's good and everything that's bad with FIM. And I think that the reason that the reason why FIM to me is very representative of the challenges that exist within the broader cybersecurity market is because it's a really good technology that has been ruined partly by the vendors that pretend to deliver FIM. It's been ruined in part by this view that it's a compliance-only discipline, that it has. That it kind of exists. Yeah, yeah, it exists because I've been asked to do it, and what has happened with FIM is that the I has been removed. Okay, and FIM has ceased to be file integrity monitoring, and has very quickly become simply file monitoring, which is kind of what you're showing here. So. You need to chair this, Amar, because I'll keep talking.
No.
And by all means, but
Mark, I think that's very.
I want to make
very
50 points in one go, but yeah.
No, that's very, very important. And Chris, I'm going to come to you, but just to stress again, and what Mark has been saying, Chris is hopefully in agreement also. But my key point here is, it's essential. It's not just we need to consider file monitoring, and importantly, as a strategy, when we do the CIPR course, we stress on FIM. Why? Because it's the earlier you detect signs of compromise, the faster you are going to be able to respond. And that, to me, is really crucial. Chris, you're aware of the CIPR. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I'm complete agreement. FIM is, for me, an essential concrete pillar in any cybersecurity strategy. And to really oversimplify the point, it is essentially about having a good grip on system files, registry keys, daemons or services that are running. If you don't know these things are changing, then you're missing possible vulnerability points in your network and on your system devices. And that's why it's critical to have. And in any other aspect of life, if we're trying to protect something, we would use technologies that can tell us when something changes. So whether that be CCTV or some kind of a sensor on a door or a window to see if it's been opened, we would use those types of not technologies, but techniques. And so this is just replicating that bit in the cyber world. So for me, it's an absolute essential part of any cybersecurity plan.
Excellent. So, yeah, go on, Mark. Feel free. Go on.
Well, no, I was just going to really labour the point. I mean, we can move on, but our world is surrounded by statistics. It kind of makes me smile to some extent, because I find myself just constantly spewing out statistics. But there's a couple that really, I think, enforce this point. And there's some recent research, which was sort of in part sponsored by Gartner, but I think they determined that something like, well, certainly north of 90%, I think it was around 91% of security incidents, breaches, whatever, were precipitated. The genesis of those was some sort of a change. And so without change control, if you have no idea what's changing in your environment, then you've got absolutely no way of determining whether that change is potentially a breach. And FIM fits very much into that. The other interesting statistic is that something like 80% of all just general IT system outages are the result of some kind of a change. So you've got an aggregate of 85% of every single issue, any issue, whether it's a security issue, whether it's an IT issue, 85% of those are going to be around uncontrolled changes. So the integrity element of FIM is absolutely essential. Without context behind the changes, you end up with file monitoring, and you end up with exactly what's on this slide. And this is my, if you like, my mission in life is to leave this legacy behind, and it's to deliver change control. And change control is fundamentally different to change management.
Excellent. Mark, we're going to touch on that, but you make very good points here. But before we get to that, one of the issues that I've seen as a CISO in the past is that there's too much noise. And this is not just in FIM, it's in a lot of things in IT. Everything generates log data, and there is simply too much noise. And we've got this diagram that we've been working on with you, also Mark and Chris, and it's basically alert fatigue, right? The
Exactly.
reality is the operations folks who are running the day-to-day, the day-to-day operations of security, we expect everything from them, and if nothing happens, we don't say thank you. But if things go wrong, the reality is they are seriously, and I found these two images of two young folks in the operations team who are sick and tired of
exactly like my kids. Yeah. Classic teenagers right there.
Totally. And the headache is, if you give these teenagers and these young analysts a screen that constantly looks red, and no context, as we were just touching on, they have nothing to see and do, and they're helpless. We're not empowering them. Chris, what exactly are we seeing here?
Well, I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways, isn't it? I think in the early days of cybersecurity, the cry out was for more information and more of a grip of what was happening. But actually, and as you say, this is not a problem that just the FIM industry suffers from. I used to do a lot of work around SIM in general and centralized logging. And when you go to these projects, the first things that the IT team and the information security teams will tell you is we just want to put every single device on, and we want to know everything that's happening all the time. But then they just drown in events and logging information. They just can't comprehend anymore. And of course, the danger with that, the danger with over-alerting is, of course, alert fatigue. But what results from that is you missing the critical instances where you are being alerted to something that you should be paying attention to. And it's about being able to pick out those critical moments. Otherwise, there is no point of having FIM or even having a logging solution if you're just going to drown yourself in alerts.
Totally. And then moving forward, we've got, I've got a wish list, okay? And I've got a wish list, and I need things. I need accurate detection. That's one thing. And I need context. And I think Mark was touching on that, and I'm going to come to that a little bit, Mark. We have an image a bit later on, but it's really crucial for accuracy because, and it ties in with this whole mantra about alert fatigue, everything being red. It's really easy to put in a system because any system, is going to promise nirvana and everything else. But if the system isn't designed with context in mind, right? If the system isn't designed for accuracy, if the system isn't designed for speed, and I'm talking from my own experience as a CISO, the system is going to end up as a system but not actually delivering any value. So, this is the other screen that we have in terms of less noise. I guess, Mark, if you want to maybe start to take a jab at this.
Yeah.
What does this mean for the person? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and all awesome points, guys, and I think, and I'm so pleased that this is a conversation that's finally happening because without context, and if you look at the slide that you had with all of the red dots, it actually becomes even worse than not having anything, because what you've done is you've swept the problem under the carpet. If you've got a monitoring solution which is purportedly there to detect issues as they occur, and in actual fact all you're getting is alert fatigue, nobody's looking at those alerts, nobody's paying attention to those, and even worse than that, everybody thinks that it's an issue that's being covered. Everybody thinks we've invested in a solution which is taking care of the problem, but in actual fact nobody's looking at the problem because there are too many alerts. And if you think about the number of changes that are likely to, if you patch 200 servers, you're probably going to get somewhere in the region of 60,000 file changes. And
sorry, come again. Stop, Mark. Sorry, just say that again slowly. Patch 200 servers. If you just on average, if you were to patch, let's say 200 servers, and that's not a that's not a big environment by any means, you're probably going to see in the region of about 60,000 changes. Okay. Okay.
So if you consider the manual task of sifting through those changes and trying to figure out whether or not there's an issue in there, it's impossible. So there are four types of changes. There are four types of changes, whether you think about this in terms of file integrity monitoring or whether you think about this in terms of just general changes. There are four types. There are expected changes, which were either good or bad. And there's all sorts of degrees of good or bad. What we mean by that is these are changes that we were expecting to make. They were patches. These were progressive, planned changes. And do you know what? What changed is exactly what we were expecting to change. These were good changes. They were well executed, and there are no issues. We've executed a great changes. So there are expected good changes. There are expected bad changes. There are changes that we planned to make that, in actual fact, didn't quite pan out as we expected them to. Then there are unexpected bad changes, and these are the ones that will kill us. The sort of unexpected, we weren't expecting it. It could easily be zero-day malware. It could be something malicious internally. But there are also unexpected changes that are okay, and that's where a lot of the change noise comes from. So one of the things that we have innovated around is change control and providing things like digital DNA referencing. So, for example, with files, a great way to monitor the integrity of files is to query those file changes against a published whitelist. In other words, are they part of a patch? So you can do lots and lots to define, what am I looking at here? Am I looking at a good change that's good? Am I looking at a good change, an expected change that is potentially bad? And that just means that I need to adjust my processes. Am I looking at an unexpected change that, okay, we weren't expecting this change, but do you know what? This change hasn't affected anything. This isn't going to hurt us. It was a random patch, or it was the kind of consequential change of something else that we did over here. It's not going to hurt us, but we do need to know about it. Or was it the fourth kind, which is, was this a change that could potentially hurt us? Now, again, nothing is a panacea, but you need context. You need to know whether the change is good or bad. You need to understand were they expected or were they unexpected. And I would say that you also need the context of changes occurring within a secured environment. So adopt, again, always conscious that I'm talking too much, so please do stop me. But there's, file integrity monitoring when it's done well is phenomenal, guys. And you've touched on this. We all have.
Your input's been really useful and very, very relevant is what we're saying. Chris, here's a question for you. So, and we're not going to take any names of any other product, but, in the past, as a CISO, like I said, I've been using other products, and there's several issues. One of them was speed. One of them was noise, as we discussed. Now, you kind of phoned me up several weeks ago saying you've reviewed NNT. I've seen a little bit of it working, and I liked it. Why did you decide to, kind of offer this in your portfolio?
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about in the screen where we had the change noise. And again, my experience working not just with FIM products, but also centralized login is I would see that very scenario. So I would go into IT rooms or sit down with information security managers, and they would have a list of alerts, and they'd scroll through maybe the top 15 or 20 and then just highlight them all and approve them all, because they really didn't have the time to go through everything, and a lot of it was just benign anyway and they didn't need to look at. The danger there is they probably just highlighted a couple of items that they did need to look at in a bit more detail. That's the danger. So with the NNT solution and with their fast add-on, which is the part that Mark was speaking about, where they have this kind of white list of known changes that you don't have to concern yourself with, things like Windows updates are a really good example. That really takes away all of that noise and allows IT teams and analysts to focus on exactly those changes that they should be spending some time on and investigating. It just puts everything back into a nice context and gives IT teams power to really look at events that they should be looking at, rather than wasting themselves on time on things like updates to Adobe or Flash or something like that, which actually is not a great example. But if you move on to the next slide, Amar, there's something I wanted to show you here in terms of a screenshot. So I don't know how well this is coming out on people's machines, but when I installed the solution a couple of weeks back just to create these screenshots, I just, without configuring the solution at all, ran a bunch of Windows updates, and I got something along the region of 555 changes. There weren't many updates to be made, but it's still a significant number. And in a traditional FIM environment, that's 500 plus alerts that you're going to have to go through, ideally on an individual basis, but the reality is you're going to select them all and just say yes. With the NNT solution, if you could take it to the next screenshot, what we actually do is we take all of those changes, we look into the FAST system, which is a cloud-based whitelist database. We see that all those changes are genuine Windows updates. So in this case, instead, all of those are marked as green, as approved and accepted changes, and instead we're left with, it's not that apparent on the screen, but it was 5 unapproved changes, much more manageable than the 500 plus of them we had before.
Is that tiny red little graph?
Absolutely. So you can see the balance has shifted now. The analysts only need to look at the tiny red graph, and instead they can ignore the green.
So this is very important to me also, because one of the key things I regularly repeat every time, even with clients, is a solution must be operationally friendly. Okay, it can be the Bentley or whatever of a solution, but it can be the most earliest in the market. But if it's not operationally friendly, if my operations teams don't like it, or it takes them too long to figure it out, it ain't going to be used, right? Now, looking at this, so this is what would be without any context. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, so this is the solution equivalent, the solution view equivalent of the red circles filling up the screen as we saw in a previous slide. So this is without context, without using the whitelisting solution. This is change noise.
Change noise, and this is, now I'm going to go to the next one. This is with context.
Exactly, correct. Yes, I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
So what this is doing, if I understand, is this is saying, okay, things happened, but actually we've gone in and added the context, looked at everything that should be okay, so that you don't have to worry about 500 alerts. You just have to look at 5 alerts that may be of possible concern.
Exactly.
Wow.
And you've executed file integrity monitoring in an automated fashion.
Rather
You're
than
looking
just
at the integrity, rather than just file monitoring, which is where it gets very confused, and particularly where, Chris was mentioning SIM tools earlier. I've seen lots of organizations and even auditors use logging tools for file integrity monitoring. All you get is a long list of file changes. That's all you get, and ironically, it can often be enough to tick the box, on the particular part of the compliance form that says, have you implemented file integrity monitoring? The answer is you haven't implemented file integrity monitoring. You've just implemented file monitoring. And one of our support engineers summed it up beautifully a couple of years ago. He said, I bought a tool to monitor changes in my environment. Oh no, I'm getting loads of changes in my environment. What do I do now? And all it does is compound the problem. So you have to have context.
No, sorry, Mark. And to kind of summarize again, file noise monitoring is not what I need. Like I said, I've been a CISO myself, and simply, I think if we looked at this slide again, the noise, and this is without any context, and this slide with context, to me, is operationally a dream, a requirement, because then my team can focus on the early indicators of something not right.
Yeah, correct. And I think that, Mark at the beginning was speaking about FIM solutions, some of the manufacturers causing problems well, not so much causing problems, but actually, really taking away from the whole point of FIM. And you're actually creating that idea yourself in what you're saying. It has to be operationally friendly. We can't just be putting in a solution because we have to based on some kind of mandate. It's got to contribute to our security posture. And, I think a lot of people who are using FIM solutions, they're in situation 1 with the change noise. It's annoying. It's not helping them anyway. What they need to be is in situation 2, where they've reduced that change noise and they're actually using a solution, not something that's generating extra work, but actually something that's providing them with a solution.
And what does it do with integration? We've got the slide here because that was one of the things I was talking to you about. Obviously, in an operational environment, as a CISO, I need stuff to integrate with things like, very importantly, and we're discussing context, change in service management. So what is it that we have over here?
Yeah, so Ed&T are, they've done a very good job of working with ServiceNow, which I would imagine is a very familiar brand to a lot of people on the call. If it's not, it's typically used as a change management solution for creating things like windows of change and approving, logging. Can be also used as a ticketing system as well. It is very popular, very, very popular. In fact, most contacts that I have, most IT teams that I interact with either know what it is or use it. So it's a very popular tool. And essentially, with this particular integration, by the way, this is a certified integration. And from what I understand, Mark, you guys are the only ones that have this certification. Is that right?
That's correct, Chris. Yes, that's absolutely right. Yep.
Excellent. So I put a little diagram on the screen, which I've actually plagiarized from NNT slide deck. I hope you don't mind, Mark. I know this is the first time you've seen that. But,
that's very good, yeah. Go ahead.
What we're attempting to do here is create a closed-loop change control process. So in ServiceNow, you already will be creating change windows. So you know that Windows updates or an installation or a change of some kind might be taking place on a server or network device, and you're putting that into ServiceNow. What we will do as a closed loop system, just to kind of summarize it, everybody can read through it on the screen, is when that change takes place, NNT can look into ServiceNow, see that that's something that is planned, and again, check that that's been executed accordingly to the plan, reduce that change noise by not reporting it as an unexpected change, unless of course it is, and then marking that ticket as closed afterwards and only highlighting areas that the analysts will need to look into. So it's about that closed loop. It's about having those integrations, making those solutions together in the network to produce that nirvana for FIM, whereby you're creating that change, it's happening, you're executing it, you're verifying it's happening, you're only warning the IT team and the analysts about things that fall outside of that scope.
Okay, can I replay this back to you? Are we saying a change happens, it checks with ServiceNow, was this an authorized change, and then comes back and adds the additional context in addition to the FAST that we discussed briefly, and gives you the final output. Is that in oversimplification?
That's pretty much it. I mean, I think, it's important to point out it's not just ServiceNow. ServiceNow, as Chris was saying, I mean, that's one of the, probably is the market leader in this space. But we have an ITSM integration module that will integrate with pretty much any change control or service desk system, and that's exactly what it is. And it's really germane to this entire presentation, because change management as a discipline is, it's at the root of most ITIL or COBIT best practice frameworks for IT operations. Change management is a super important discipline. The problem with change management from a security standpoint is it makes one huge assumption, and it makes a very dangerous assumption. The assumption that it makes is that all of the changes that we approved and all of the changes that were commissioned through the change management process, the changes that ultimately took place were exactly what we expected to happen. Now, that does two things.
And that's a very dangerous. It's a very dangerous assumption.
It surely is. I mean, it creates a blind spot for the internal man threat, because if I wanted to do something malicious, well, I'll just wait until the next, plan change window, because everybody's going to assume that every change that occurred within that plan change window was part of this plan change. So it's a great time to do that. And in the case of a few pretty high-profile breaches here in the United States, I'm actually based in the US. The bad guys, in inverted commas, they'll target those periods of time because they know that they can, dive in. So change control is different to change management. Change control is the practice of understanding the changes that are happening within my environment, reconciling those changes with changes that were approved through something like ServiceNow or any other IT service management system, and creating this closed loop system. And it's absolutely right. And I think that the organization that really nails change control nails cybersecurity, because every single breach, it doesn't matter what kind of breach it is, there isn't a piece of malware that's been invented yet that can cause any harm unless it changes something. It has the manifestation or the genesis of every single breach is a change, either something that wasn't there previously is now there, or something that was there has changed. And the reason that breaches get away with it is because they're able to hide in clear sight. They're able to hide in amongst the sort of, day-to-day change noise that we've all talked about. And if you combine this automation, if you can integrate your change control system, the system that's looking at the changes that are happening in production, with the changes that you expected to happen, with some sort of digital DNA referencing that can tell you whether or not those changes were fundamentally good or bad, you can really, like Chris was saying, you can take, 99% of the changes down to a few percent, and you've now narrowed your scope, and it makes the whole point of this much more achievable.
And to me, again, it makes my focus on early detection, because the earlier I can detect something, the faster I can stop any malicious threat actor, whether it's an advanced nation state. The idea is and as we all agree, and I think this is the fundamental thing, two things are required. One is access, and one is the ability to change something from a known state to an unknown state. So
exactly.
If those two,
and don't think about file integrity monitoring, just DLLs, .exes, like Chris was saying. Really, file integrity monitoring should be viewed in the context of change control period, configuration files, registries, processes, services, ports, any movable part that can be changed really does need to be tracked and monitored. Absolutely, and in context, exactly. And I think if you nail that, you exactly, yeah.
No, totally. And if this can be done, to me, my strategy as a CISO comes to life, because I need to guarantee my business when I work with clients. I need to give them the assurance that actually early detection is happening. Now, whatever people say, without understanding what has changed, without authorization, early detection is extremely difficult, near impossible. And this is something really crucial. I think it's one of those things, Mark, and Chris, you obviously know that, but it's one of those things, sometimes when things are too simple, people tend to ignore it, because humans have unbelievable, this thing to have complex solutions, because it makes it look really amazing. But actually,
I couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. Yeah.
But actually,
could not agree more.
It's so simple that it's something actually relatively straightforward. For a hack to succeed, you need access privileges, and you need to be able to change something from a known to an unknown state. Full stop. If we can master that, we are mastering the early detection of anything going wrong.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely.
And it's something very few
and the
people
simplicity,
talk about.
And the simplicity of it is something that I love, and it's also both fascinating and enormously frustrating, because I think you're quite right. I think that there's a degree of human nature that comes into play where almost this kind of bright shiny object paradigm sort of creeps in. I need some sort of magical solution that's going to fix security for me. Whereas in actual fact, if you did three things, if you know what you've got, if you know what your environment is, if you can understand that environment is fundamentally fit for purpose, that it's secured, that it's that it's effectively that it's healthy, and then track changes to that, like you said, to that otherwise good, healthy, secure state, you've reduced your job from sort of, let's say, 100% down to 10-15%, and then you can complete the rest of it with other process. So yeah, absolutely. We could not be more on the same page here.
Excellent. No, and I've got the final. Almost closing slide, but I thought about why implement FIM, and one of the things I came up with: cyber criminals are going to hate you.
Right. Yeah. Right.
You're going to be detecting their possible moves, and then change managers and auditors will love you, which is another unbelievable thing. When do they ever love cybersecurity people?
Yeah, that's right.
And then the final one was compliance may even buy you coffee.
You never know. Yeah, no, it's it's great. It's great to see. I mean, it's Chris has touched on it, and we see it all of the time. And I spend my life talking to security professionals, and to one of the final things I'll just sort of leave everybody with is that this is all great in theory. Definitely put this to test. The other important thing is that you provide evidence of all of the things that we've talked about. One of the things that I think that is super, super important, and I would say we do particularly well, is we take this information and we deliver it to the wider audience. So it could be as simple as a report that goes to, senior management that says, we're a little bit more secure this week than we were last week. We've reduced the number of unplanned changes within our environment from 6,000 a week to less than 35, and we've applied a hardened policy to all of our systems, which again is part of file integrity monitoring, is part of the context. You can't. This isn't something you can do in isolation. You really, if you're going to run file integrity monitoring, one of the things that we do before we do that is we harden the system. We remediate any configuration vulnerabilities, because file integrity monitoring without doing that is it's like looking at the size of the footprints in your front garden to try and spot an intruder, but leaving the back door and the windows open at the same time. Do yourself a favor, take a look at it, put it to the test, but make sure that everything that we've said needs to be available in some sort of management reporting. And I think that's something I learned probably 20 years ago. Somebody once said to me, the strength of a great security solution is to a large degree in the information that it provides. And I think you touched on that earlier. Is it user-friendly? Can I interface with this? Is it communicating with me in a way that I can make sense of, and in a way that allows me to, promote the value of this, not just within the security team, but to a wider audience? And just as a real final thing from me, one of the interesting things that we see is that when we start to distribute this information amongst senior management, for example, they look at that and they say, hey, this is great. I want this information everywhere. I don't just want this information within my in-scope PCI environment. If you're telling me that these systems are fundamentally fit for purpose now, and you're telling me that we're in control of everything that's changing on these systems, yeah, you know what? I need to know that everywhere. I need to know that information, and that's now with the scalability, with the automation, with the intuitive nature of this type of solution. That's now within reach.
Excellent, Mark. It's really been really useful, your input there. A quick reminder to everyone: the attachments and links you can always download now and later. We're nearing the time in terms of 40 minutes into this. Chris, I've said everything I needed to say. Chris, any closing comments on this? What we discussed?
I don't know how I would top what Mark just said, so I'm just going to underline what you said and say, yep, I agree.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to say the final things over here. It's about, all of this needs to come together, as Mark and Chris both have been saying. To me, it's about operational friendliness. Operational friendliness, it cannot come without products that support, that know what they're doing, that are speedy, that provide context. And to me, what's really important, and Mark, I'm not blowing hot air because I'm very critical of vendors, I'll be honest with you. I'm being very open here. Chris knows me. It's very refreshing to see CEO of a technical firm knowing what he's talking about and very passionately understanding the problem and the solution. So much appreciated, actually, that it was very useful, your input and your passion and your understanding of the problem. So folks listening in, Chris is from ACS, if I'm correct, the official folks to talk about the NNT product. But more importantly, you can obviously give it a go. But I like what I hear. It's really important to me when management understands what they're selling. It makes a lot of a difference because they're not selling it. They understand the problem and they're trying to educate people. You can always give us questions. Leave questions with us at info@cm-alliance. Do give us feedback. And if we have no other questions, I want to thank Mark and Chris for joining us and all the people watching in.
Excellent. Many thanks. Many thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Chris.
Take care. Cheers, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.